as much as we want to help out, we can't push people
Sure.
down a healing path. And that's, I think, one of the things that needs to be emphasized more in the psychedelic community is that a lot of us come from, these great retreats where we're on cloud nine, and we realize all these things about ourselves. And the first thing you want to do is yell it from the mountaintop, and you see everybody in your family like, oh, you should go, that person should go. But at the end of the day, everybody's on their own healing journey, and they need to come to places like our organization or the retreats themselves. If they're pressured or somebody else is pushing them to do it, then they're not necessarily going to get what you think they're going to get out of it. They need to come to that. They need to digest the information and determine it's right for them. And they also, more importantly, need to be able to put in the work and dedication and time it takes around the psychedelic experience.
Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast, where we bring you powerful conversations surrounding the sensible and therapeutic use of psychedelics and plant medicines towards healing trauma. I'll introduce you to guests who, through their own personal journey and transformation, tell the Worth the Fight story. I'm your host, Matt Simpson, author of Worth the Fight, Acting for a Better World, a guide to spirituality, psychedelic medicines, and overcoming trauma. Thank you for listening. Hello, everyone. Here we are, Worth the Fight podcast number 39. We're moving this right along. Our next guest is Jesse Gould. Jesse is a returning guest. He is an early supporter of the podcast who was on back in September of 2019, Worth the Fight podcast number 3. It was so great connecting with Jesse. He has such calm, grounded energy. As a former Army Ranger, I'm sure that he's been trained for these precarious and uncertain times that we find ourselves in. And he definitely exudes that calm, peaceful energy. And I always find so much value in our conversations. And when I hear him speak, he's really done incredible work with the Heroic Hearts Project. And we share updates on the Ambassador Program. If you think this veteran collective soul healing mission is a potential solution for our troubled times, healing the hearts and minds of our war veterans amid a mental health crisis and suicide epidemic. If you think that this is a solution, get involved. Donations are huge, but there's also creative ways to get involved, to create awareness for our war veterans that are struggling too much, and they would absolutely love your help. This resonates. In our episode, we illuminate the exponential value of how veterans can serve as a bridge between our struggling collective amid a mental health crisis. 1 in 4 of us on psych meds, duped by the broken Western mental health model, and a post-prohibition world. We dive deep, and it's always a pleasure, again, speaking with Jesse and sharing his insight as he's done, again, an immense amount of work for the Heroic Hearts Project and for this cause of getting medicines that work to our war veterans that are struggling far too much. And I did misspeak. Jesse is the second returning guest. I recorded this podcast the same week that I recorded the podcast episode with Kelly Tennant of OK Babe when I had her and her partner Connor Moore on the show. It was recorded right around the same time, which is an amazing segue. Want to hear a couple air their dirty laundry, talk about taboo topics, and share their hot takes on what's happening in the world? Well, then OK Babe is a perfect podcast for you to get a glimpse of the unfiltered lives of Kelly and Connor. They're passionate about squashing shame and having honest conversations about what's happening within their relationship and how they navigate communication and sex. It's explicit and raw, and they're ready for you. Head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe now. Check out the OK Babe podcast. They're doing bold work around sexual taboos. I'd say that nearly all of us are healing from some form of sexual shame and religious trauma from the dogmatic nonsense of yesteryear. They are brave enough to confront it head on. And they are a lot of fun, too, imparting a light-hearted, playful spirit to their audience. Without further ado, I give you my conversation with Jesse Gould of the Heroic Hearts Project. Thank you so much for listening. I'm here with Jesse Gould, the founder of the Heroic Hearts Project. Jesse is our first returning guest here on the Worth the Fight podcast. We had him as one of our original guests, Worth the Fight podcast number 3. Welcome back to the show, Jesse. How are things? What's going on?
Hey, Matt, always great to talk to you. Always great to see you. Things are going well, busy, kind of trying to assess these weird times just as much as anybody else. But, it has been pretty amazing time in terms of networking. I feel like so many people are just locked at home and stir crazy got the better of them. So I think a lot of networking and some great ideas will be coming from this once we recover.
Wonderful, wonderful to hear that you're taking advantage of this sacred pause and, getting the connections in order. And it sounds like you're taking a break away from sending war veterans to Central and South America for ayahuasca healing ceremonies. Is that correct with what's going on, all the precariousness?
Yeah, in terms of straight up, we're still active and we're still reaching out to people and talking to veterans and doing info sessions and as much as we can given the current situation. But operationally, in terms of organizing and sending vets to retreats, we have to do a tactical pause right now, just because of the safety concerns, but also logistically, it's not possible. Most of the retreat centers are not running. International travel is obviously not the greatest thing right now. And then just in terms of getting groups of people in a more confined area, the psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, really make you more sensitive and open you up. And so the last thing you want is to go in there with any sort of nerves or fear. And that's kind of what defines the current times right now, nerves and fear. And so we just have to, be patient and listen to nature and see where it's taking us. But like I said, it's been an opportunity to grow other aspects. And, one of the ones which I'm sure we'll talk about is the Ambassador Program of, through your pushing, which I am so grateful for. We finally are getting the groundwork on that, which is, really empowering people, civilians, veterans, professionals, to join the fight in whatever capacity they can. Obviously we're a nonprofit, and so some people can help by donating, but other people might only have time or expertise. And so we're trying to develop a pipeline and a support system and guidance that allows people to help veterans in their area.
Wonderful. Great to hear that there's developments with the Ambassador Program. What do you envision for the benefits of the Ambassador Program? We talked community resilience. I've been hearing that more and more and more in your messaging, and that's been something that's really resonant with me as when shit hit the fan a few months ago with COVID, and we're in these very precarious times. Before COVID, we had challenges, President Trump was in the process of being impeached. And now we have, this social unrest and a lot of these racial injustices that are coming to the surface. And what do you envision the benefit of, I think the Heroic Hearts Project and your work has become super relevant with what's going on in the world, and what do you envision, or how can the Heroic Hearts Project and the Ambassador Program help promote community resilience?
Well, and to add to your list, we have a lovely election, which I'm sure will be nice on all sides to look forward to.
They are coming for our agency, both sides. Watch out, everyone.
And I'm currently here in Florida. For some reason, given the year, I feel like it's going to be a bad hurricane season. So hopefully it's not. But yeah, I guess one potential silver lining of the whole COVID virus situation and people being locked down and having to deal with existential and real crises and just dealing with their own thoughts without the same distraction it does seem that mental health has become more of a topic of discussion, especially with relation to first responders and people working on the front lines in hospitals. I think it's a pretty well agreed upon thing that people coming from this are going to need some assistance on the mental health side. And, that's really where we're seeing these plants and psychedelics, that's what they do. They help people move past this. They help people connect to just uncomfortable silence and the traumas that people have been distracting themselves from. With I guess the main goal of the ambassador program is really one of sustainability. We are an international organization now, but we are like a hub. And so, as I mentioned, we rely on donations, but as with many other we're still small, but as with any other nonprofit, the connectivity it's almost like you're giving money to a faceless organization. And we try to do that with testimonies, but that decreases a lot when you bring it down to the micro level. So when you go to your own hometown and there's a group of veterans that your dollar is going to help directly, that has a much different effect than if you're just bringing it to an organization and you don't necessarily know or have connection to the specific people that it's helping. So we're really trying to it's that connectivity sort of thing, and that adds on all dynamics of what we're trying to do. So if we have, let's say, a group in Las Vegas, which we're working on right now, of a veteran and civilian led, we get a group of veterans that are interested in what we're doing. We find support, financial support and community support, professional support in the local area that they can meet directly. That community support helps provide a way for these veterans to get to one of our retreats once it's back up and operational. And then these veterans already know each other, hopefully have an amazing time, come back, spread the word through their actions, spread the word through their stories, pay it forward, and are going to be the best people to continue that expansion of information on that local level. And hopefully, like what we said with this, that is the best way to get information, not just to the veteran community, but to the community in general. Veterans are obviously not the only ones with trauma, but I do think that they are good ambassadors for that message to get to a wider population.
Yeah, I love the way you've articulated that. And what's really alive for me, I had a really poignant conversation with my dear friend Lisa. And this was last fall, and it was right after I had Marcus and Amber Capone from Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions on the podcast when our Navy SEALs and Special Forces came out of the psychedelic closet. And I was meeting up for coffee with Lisa and said, hey, give this a listen, and she was a supporter for veterans, for VET with Ryan LeCompte. And she said something that was really poignant. It was this notion of the potential of not just healing our warriors, but the potential in which they have to play a huge role in our communities, like you said, by giving back, by paying it forward, by raising their hand, by being the ambassador, like you've articulated. And, she had a perception of almost, and that was the first time that really got through to her. And she's read the book, she's read Worth the Fight. She's been a dear friend and supporter and super intelligent woman. And I was really shocked to hear that. And I'm just wondering, like, if there's messaging or if there's programs that are, what is getting in the way from the good people of the United States of America to see the value in healing the hearts and minds of our war veterans amid a mental health crisis and suicide epidemic? We've been over the numbers. We all know, 22 suicides a day. That number is likely far greater. So many that are stuck in self-abuse, the opioid crisis and mess with the big pharmaceuticals, addiction, whatnot. What is getting in the way?
I think it is just, on the forefront, obviously stigma and just the bureaucracy and catch-22 that is the drug policy that feeds into the stigma. But it is sort of that information. It's that connectivity. It's as with all these sort of things, any stigma, any prejudice generally stems from not being directly connected to the individual or to the thing. When people see, and it really takes sort of that person or that person you can actually almost reach out to. Because if it's just this amorphous person from a different country or a different state, again, that adds that layer of like, oh, well, who's that? It's not me.
duality Akshay talks a lot about, the one and the millions. You can know that millions of people are dying and struggling, and but then again, if you put a name on that one person, someone or two people or a small group, people are far more likely to act and to do something than to know of this massive group of people. I think that you've been getting at that notion of making it personal, making
Right.
it local, making it close.
Yeah, and that's the goal of the ambassador program. And it's you can be upset about humans, but it's also human nature. We are very empathetic creatures, but there's a limit to how much empathy and how many people we can bring into our bubble. There's the number, I forget what it's called, but is it maybe like Dunn's number, something like that?
Dunbar's
number, where
Yeah.
you can only have so many intimate connections. And that's kind of a little bit of a loose thing, but it's the same thing of there's only so many things and people and causes that you can care about. Otherwise you're just overly stimulated. And so I think it is that interpersonal sort of thing. You see it on a very exaggerated way within the veteran community. I just had a conversation with another vet, and his wife was giving him shit because she was like, I've been talking to him about this for the past 5 years. And now that a veteran's telling him, he's actually kind of interested. And it's like, it's funny, but it is true. And some of the most poignant messengers we've had for what we're doing have just been notable veterans that have pretty big social media followings that don't fall into sort of the psychedelic stereotype or whatever you view there. And so when these big, warriors are coming out and spreading their message, that causes people to listen because there's the trust factor. Since it's another veteran, the veteran will trust it more, and they speak the same sort of language. And I think that trust dynamic is what is needed in the local community for them, like I said, to be within arm's reach of like, oh, I don't necessarily know him, but he's right there. I can see this. I can go to like an info session with him, as opposed to watching it on TV or social media. I think nowadays, because of social media, we've almost put on these extra filters of the approachability or what we believe anymore. And so I think in that sense that we aren't really believing anything, the one-on-one and the immediate trust factor are becoming even more important.
Love that. What would you recommend to somebody who might be in a situation where they want to get involved? They've checked out your website. They love the messaging. They love what you stand for. They see all of the good action going on Instagram and all of the speaking opportunities of you sharing this mission and message of hope and healing. And let's say they have a cousin that is a veteran who's stuck in self-abuse, or they have a neighbor who's really struggling and maybe openly talking about his mental health challenges. Now that we're in this time, what you had said a moment ago is very poignant. I'm sensing that as well, that we're in a pressure cooker right now with what's going on in the world. So, and there's been this invitation, a lot of programming, that is branding that the power of vulnerable strength, the paradoxical power of vulnerable strength. What would you say to someone who wants to get involved to the ambassador program, and how do they go about maybe approaching somebody or setting something up, or can you put in mind a scenario that is something that is common?
Yeah, of course. The direct way is follow us on social media, and then on our website, we have an application which is pretty brief. So for people that actually want to donate time or their expertise, they can go on the heroicheartsproject.org and fill out that application and kind of let us know as much as possible how they envision helping out. And then as we get this program rolling, it's still in its initial phases. So, we're just trying to take one step at a time to figure out what it is and what's the best ways to move forward. And so somebody, for instance, like what you said, they're connected to veterans and they want to help. What we'll try to do is we'll reach out to them, start that conversation, and then start the conversation towards, okay, how can we create the support network in your local area? If you already know some vets that are interested, let's start that conversation. Maybe reach out to some local already established vet organizations that might be interested. And I think the first step is always an info session. Unfortunately, in that scenario, there are those cases a lot where relatives or friends, they see a suffering, they see somebody that they love suffering, or like a veteran that's suffering, and they want to help out. And the best way is for provide that veteran information, because as much as we want to help out, we can't push people
Sure.
down a healing path. And that's, I think, one of the things that needs to be emphasized more in the psychedelic community is that a lot of us come from, these great retreats where we're on cloud nine, and we realize all these things about ourselves. And the first thing you want to do is yell it from the mountaintop, and you see everybody in your family like, oh, you should go, that person should go. But at the end of the day, everybody's on their own healing journey, and they need to come to places like our organization or the retreats themselves. If they're pressured or somebody else is pushing them to do it, then they're not necessarily going to get what you think they're going to get out of it. They need to come to that. They need to digest the information and determine it's right for them. And they also, more importantly, need to be able to put in the work and dedication and time it takes around the psychedelic experience. I'm sure you brought this up plenty of times. It's the before and afterwards as much, if not more, as the experience itself. And so, having people being able to put in the time and effort around these kind of things, they need to come to that.
Beautifully put. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for putting that out there, how one would go about doing this. And yes, education is so gosh darn important with this, and everybody comes around in time. And what was it? Mike Bledsoe had said something that was really profound. He was a Navy veteran who's done a lot of medicine work. He said, "What's up?" too. So we were talking, your ears were ringing a few weeks back. And that notion of discovery is everybody has to make their own discovery. And and the value of set and setting. And I love that aspect. And I think that is such a crucial part of, and certainly is something that we've talked about in depth on the podcast, and will continue to be emphasized, as that is one of the, I think, the critical values of this psychedelic renaissance is set and setting. And, looking at where we went wrong in the 60s and 70s, and holding these medicines with the deepest reverence and respect for the state shifting potential that they do, and being in a place where we've done the work ahead of time, and we have the game plan set forth for properly integrating these big peak experiences.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And, hopefully you're seeing that kind of, I don't know if it's a shift or just coming to terms with the dynamic that the psychedelic world is changing in a pretty rapid pace. This is delayed a little bit, but still expanding in a lot of other ways. And so there have been a call by some members of the community to really focus on creating thought leaders or parameters or even guidance to where we kind of keep some sort of apparatus around what's going on and protect what is important. Because there's a lot of fear, and it's a hard dynamic, because one, you don't want to be gatekeepers, and you don't want to force people to view one way or the other. On the other side, you want to keep certain negative elements from seeping in and controlling the narrative. There's a lot of fear that things might progress similar to the way of cannabis, or even, going back further, what happened with when mushrooms were sort of originally adapted in the Western society in the 50s. So with the latter case with mushrooms, some prominent people came back from a trip to Mexico and were actually published in a magazine about their great experience. And so then that got the magic mushrooms super popular, and it really destroyed a lot of the culture that was using and keeping hidden the ceremonial use of these mushrooms. And it really devastated the economics of it, really devastated it. And then in terms of cannabis, you're seeing the same sort of thing of this grass-led movement, this movement that people have been pushing for a while. Once the ability to make millions and billions of dollars off of this crop came into it, it became a completely different landscape, a completely different beast, to where now some of the original people in it are being pushed out because they can't afford like the regulation or the certification. And then you're getting these billion-dollar companies that are, dictating how it's to be done. And, you're kind of getting the Starbucks model of cannabis. So, there is that sensitivity within the psychedelic world of how can we protect what we know works and the valuable parts of it, the ceremony, continuing the set and setting, continuing or respecting and preserving the indigenous tradition without putting too much of the Western scope of influence around it. So it'll be interesting, but it's good to have at least the conversations right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are. I've been hearing more buzz around that as we push closer and closer towards legalization, and as these decriminalization movements, move forward and gain steam. That these are important conversations that and perhaps there's valuable lessons that can be learned from the cannabis having paved this path, a similar path, years back. And I respect and hear what you're saying in regards to honoring the tradition and honoring ceremony and honoring the indigenous peoples that have been carrying this ancient wisdom, and this ancient wisdom, which I think we're both in agreement has tremendous potential for our culture. That is, this everything that from my vantage point, everything that we see right now is a projection of unhealed trauma, and there's loads of it right now, and a lot of people hurting, and these medicines are making their way into the mainstream and are close, and again, MDMA assisted psychotherapy is maybe a year or two away from being a legal medicine and a cure for PTSD, and the potential that has to slowly start to overhaul our broken Western mental health paradigm is leaves a lot of room for optimism.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot of great things to see, and there's a lot of amazing people leading the charge on that. So it does leave you with a sense of optimism, and it is exciting to be in the midst of it, knowing it's there and seeing how it's forming with all the trials and tribulations as well.
Absolutely. You had said this notion of comparing the veterans to being a bridge, and the way that you had said that in one of your talks was really resonant. That idea of bridging these two worlds, bridging the healing world, this world of health and vitality, and these transcendent medicines, and all of this you talked a bit about that incredible glow that we feel after these peak psychedelic experiences, and then the reality of where we're at. Like, hey, we're in a time where there's prohibition, and there's the reality of people are struggling. There's the economics of how do these psychedelics fit into the model. I think that one of the big problems with psychedelic healing, and specifically ayahuasca, is the problem that people have with it is that it works, people get better, and then no one makes money. And of course we have a whole healthcare model that is built on people taking pills and a residual aspect. But can you speak to why, or make a case for why veterans can be a bridge to and can lead this charge as we're pushing out into the unknown?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I mentioned this in like the breaking convention speech, is that, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, we are in a information and cultural shift, and I don't think we've really fully grasped what that means to us and our culture and how we interact in terms of the internet and social media. So, I mean, it's obviously causing a lot of disarray right now and arguments and polarization, and we are at the stage where misinformation is rampant, and especially in this country, what to believe, who to believe, what is news, what is facts, it's all up in the air, unfortunately.
Totally.
And you can't rely on anything on social media. And so I think more and more the power of the source is going to be important, of who are the trusted sources, what are the trusted sources, where is this message coming from? And it's always been the case, but I think it's emphasized even more so. And so in terms of trust, and at least for right now, it's always a shifting kind of thing. There are people that tend to always gather trust. They tend to be authoritarian, or figures of authority with certain messages. So obviously, if you have a MD or PhD and they're talking about something medical, you're much more likely to listen to them than you are, somebody that's just on the street. I think you're seeing that with like Fauci. Like, no matter what political spectrum going on, which changing a little bit, but the vast majority of Americans trust him in terms of like COVID related kind of stuff, because he is that authority and he has the past and the credentials, and he doesn't seem too politically engaged, right? And so all these things are building on us. The same kind of thing you generally have is with veterans. They just tend to be this pillar of trust and respect, especially in the US. People understand and really value the fact that a lot of these individuals signed up, volunteered to risk their lives for the sake of this concept that is America, this concept that is freedom, when they didn't have to do that. They put themselves in harm's way so others didn't have to do that. And that tends to go pretty well across the political spectrum as well, with some exceptions. And so, when you have this veteran that is already trusted and they're speaking about something that is not in no way associated with them in terms of drugs and psychedelics and drug use, that is a very powerful message, whoever you are, because it's where the message is coming from. If somebody is dressed in tie-dye and they have that almost like 1970s cartoonist hippie, or the new age sort of person from California, and they're talking to you about cannabis or psychedelics, and they're in Georgia, I mean, the message is not going to get through, right? Like, nobody's going to be like, oh yeah, okay, let me listen to this person. But if you get, like a 6'3" Green Beret, with just filled out with muscles and just has that, 100-yard stare, 1,000-yard stare, and he's talking about his psychedelic experience, more people are going to at least like turn their head to figure out what's going on there. And that's all you need. It's that intro. If you can get people to at least sit to the table, you very rarely will convince them, the first go. But if they are listening, then that's huge. That's conversation is the key to all this. And, I do think in the US, the veterans are the key to that, because they are the only group that can bring that is respected enough, that can bring in this controversial topic to demographics that would otherwise never entertain that conversation. And I've seen that myself, just traveling, running across people in the airports, going to the South, going to bars, bringing up what I do. And you can feel that sort of uncomfortability depending on the person's viewpoint, but they listen, because I'll bring up my background and I'll bring up what I've seen with other veterans, and it forces them to at least like, okay, maybe, and that maybe is all you need.
I love it. Thank you for breaking that down. And that's really, a lot of the motivation as to why I've been so high on the veteran community as a solution, beating this love drum. Like, hey guys, let's heal the hearts and minds of those who have served and those who have acted. And that is a strong. There's an element of action. What you were saying a moment ago about the mistrust of how do we trust the information? There's a shitstorm of data coming at all of us more than ever before. And we both, we talked earlier about both sides coming for our agency in terms of the election year, and with what's going on in the world, like who do we trust? And there's people that talk, and then there's people that do, and veterans are people that do and that have done. And have a track record of like, hey, there's been action, and I think that actions build trust in a state where there's so many people running their mouth and blah 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 blah. It's like, no, what's true is what is backed by action, and the actions, not our words, actions build trust. And so that is really resonant to me as to why people will listen to a war veteran, as opposed to somebody who's maybe the stereotypical person in this psychedelic renaissance. And I love your disposition and your presence, because I think it creates dissonance when people see you and you're talking about ayahuasca, and there's this vision of how it's supposed to be. And I love that idea that you've been able to maybe decode that and see through that, and are so comfortable with who you are that you've maintained that persona, which is ultimately trustworthy.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, just I guess a very relevant example, because it is Juneteenth today, and with all the Black Lives Matter, a very relevant example is how Martin Luther King approached a lot of his own civil disobedience and protests, and he had the people around him and himself wear suits, and even though he organized these things that would put them in these sort of conflicting kind of spots, or these possibly perilous sort of spots, it was always, don't react, be well dressed, be very respectful as much as possible, because the moment that you fall into the stereotypes, or you fall into what is they expect of this sort of like subhuman, then you lose that battle. But if you maintain that moral high ground, that messaging high ground, that trust high ground, then that's power right there. And that's why he was so effective, is because he didn't meet people's expectations. And it was broadcast on TV of these very well-dressed, respectful, well-spoken individuals that were just marching peacefully. And so then when violence did come, it shocked a lot of Americans, and that shock was what pushed people past their own stigmas, because at the basic level, people hopefully don't want to see that.
Love that. I've never wrapped my hands around or heard that in relation to the psychedelic renaissance and this push, but it's very similar, bold social change that we're seeking to push forth. And I think that and I just have been thinking about this the last few weeks in terms of Akshay, my mentor Akshay Nanavati, the author of Firvana, and about how I've gravitated towards the veteran, and because the work that I've been doing has been tied to this veteran collective soul healing mission. But what you just said a moment ago really was resonant, of that idea of stigma, and the idea of what, and I think it's because of that, and I sense that, and I wrote about that in Worth the Fight, that idea of there's dogma on the other side of the fence too. And when we do this deep healing work, and but to maintain who I am and not necessarily be what I thought others wanted me to be, if that makes sense. But to know that I'm in a brotherhood and a sisterhood of people who value me based on my actions, and that's all that really matters. And that idea of, and this is one of the, as I'm getting ready to, I promote Akshay's work, and I was telling you about the massive publicity accelerator. I'm really excited to partner with him on this. But that idea of one of these notions that I think is so profoundly his gift is no judgment, and so long as your actions align with universal law and you're serving people, go fucking do it, but that idea that you guys have fought and fought for our freedoms, you fought for those freedoms, and take those very seriously, because you've lost brothers and sisters, and that idea of empowering people to own their voice, I think, has been really important to me on my path. And I know we're getting a little bit off target here, but we're still talking about how the value of veterans being the bridge. Another thing that you'd said that was deeply resonant, that I've been kicking around the last few months, but this idea of the veterans being an exponential solution. Veterans are white, they're Black, they're Hispanic, they're Asian American, they're Indigenous American, they're male, they're female, they're rich, they're poor. They encompass all of the vast religions and religious freedoms that we have here in the U.S. And they're in all of our communities. They are us. And that idea of rallying around the veterans and knowing that as this message pushes out into the veteran community and gets the momentum and gets the buzz, that this is something that could exponentially grow in such a rapid, profound manner. What are your thoughts on that? That's another reason why I'm so excited. I have this Thich Nhat Hanh quote here that is so profound. Veterans are the light at the tip of the candle, illuminating the way for the whole nation. If veterans can achieve awareness, transformation, and peace, they can share with the rest of society the realities of war, and they can teach us how to make peace with ourselves and each other, so we never have to use violence to resolve conflicts again. And I think that that's the end game is peace. And to truly know peace, I think you have to know war, and you guys and gals know war. So what are your thoughts on veterans being an exponential solution?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is true in a lot of ways. I think there's been like a few pieces written how, even though you might not expect it, the military is often like one of the leaders in social change, just because the objectives of the military are different than necessarily the objectives of the culture. The culture, you have to kind of deal with a lot more voices and all this other kind of stuff, whereas the military has a purpose. It has like an objective, like in World War II, like we're going to defeat, the Nazis or this like fascism or whatever. And so it tends to embrace these, even though there can still be hangups and stuff, but the military, sort of led in terms of integration, in terms of a lot of other sort of things, like you said, just representing across cultural, religious, and racial sort of dynamic. And so it does really speak to a certain dynamic of the U.S. But it also tends to be almost like the canary in the coal mine to a lot of issues, because it is this extreme version of a lot of the U.S. and society. So, what everybody else is experiencing, veterans tend to experience on a much higher level, to where, especially with like the social media and the isolation, they have these contrasts of worlds of this training world, this war world, and then civilian world, which is in its own sort of bubble. And so they're experiencing the contrast of these two worlds, and tend to be, that's why you're seeing the depression rates and suicide rates in society in general increasing, but especially within sort of the veteran community. And yeah, I mean, like just in my own experience, no matter what country I've been to or area or group, the archetype of a warrior is cross-cultural, cross everything. And so, I've been to countries like Cambodia where I didn't even speak the same language as people, but somehow it got relayed that I was in the military, and, these tuk-tuk drivers were all excited. One actually gave me a belt that he was wearing because it had like the Marine Corps logo, even though I wasn't a Marine, but he didn't know that, but it was still like this amazing gesture in the middle of nowhere in Cambodia. So, I have seen that cross-cultural, because it is one of those archetypes that people understand. There are a few of those, like the teacher, the healer, the warrior, these basic human, I guess, outcomes that are universal, that are always there. And the benefit with veterans too is what you're seeing is that if you look at how many nonprofits are started by veterans, it has to, I don't know the specific numbers, but it has to exceed that of the average person. There's just a tremendous amount of it, because they have that energy, that drive, that action, like you're saying. And so part of what we do, especially at the end of our integration and stuff, is suggest that to veterans, is that you are a warrior. You're no longer are in battle, you no longer are in combat, but that's not what makes you necessarily a warrior. That was part of you, but now you use that same warrior spirit for other means of helping other veterans, of giving back, of nonprofit work. And a lot of them really take to it because it is that sense of purpose that they already know, and that they have that sort of mindset of how to direct initiatives to be successful.
Love that. Yeah, it's like a rechanneling of the energy from the war experience, this service time experience, to being a peaceful warrior. And I present and do talks sometimes, and there's always people don't grasp this idea, and maybe it's because they haven't gone through a similar transformation with plant medicine like ayahuasca or psilocybin, where these are profoundly impactful healing experiences, and that notion of how these medicines can transform the hearts and reform the hearts, and really getting at those traumas from the early years, often from the early years of childhood development, and but then shifting the trajectory towards service and towards paying it forward, and this idea that with action our veterans have honor, integrity, and courage. They've acted. There's unparalleled leadership training that y'all have, and discipline that is instilled from the service time, and that's a pretty amazing formula right there for success and positive systemic social change from my vantage point.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's it's that forged by fire kind of thing. It's it's not always across the board, but there's no better way to, I feel like, learn leadership outside of that high intensity, extreme sort of condition. Some of the best leaders come from that environment, because there's no way to replicate that in like a business school or even like a training camp. Like, you either succeed at it or you're going to be replaced, because there's no options, there's no flexibility, because people's lives are on the line.
Powerful. Thank you again for breaking that down. I want to shift the conversation. There's a book that has got me hot in a good way, really waking up to some of the underlying injustice that we have here, in the West and all over the world. And it's a profound book called Winners Take All, an elite charade of changing the world. I forget the guy's name. It's a very long, I believe it's an Indian name that I'm going to butcher, but the book is profound. I'm about halfway through, and there's some really staggering statistics that the top 8 billionaires on planet Earth have the wealth and have the resources of half of our planet. And this, he's really decoding this it's fucking phony philanthropy. It's bullshit. It's a marketing scheme, and the rich are getting richer, and the living wages for the rest of the planet are staying the same. And this notion of your work being genuine and earnest and about service, and it's not a winners take all formula that you're almost going against the grain, because we're empowering the hearts and minds of people to, in an amazing way, in a loving way, to infiltrate their circles of influence with vulnerability, with courage, with action, with speaking their truth about the realities of maybe their service time, what's on their heart, the realities of often this trauma in the early years of childhood development that we keep getting at as potentially a root here. And I just wanted to, after reading this book, I just want to even applaud you even more for bucking the trend and genuinely caring about doing what's right, not just for your brothers and sisters, your fellow veterans that are amid a mental health crisis, but I know that you get fully the sacred duty and responsibility of what the veteran voice means to our collective when we're losing trust more and more each day. And again, I just wanted to applaud your efforts as I'm seeing more and more contrast of the reality of what you're doing in a really sick society.
Well, I appreciate that. I can't judge what other people do. Obviously you wish there was kind of more giving back or, something. But at the end of the day, it's like anything else. You kind of have to just stay in your lane and figure out what's best for you. And, for me, it's kind of one of those things of like, what am I doing to get out of bed every day? In 10 years and 20 years, will I look back and be proud of what I've accomplished and where I'm at? As a kid, would I be looking up at where I'm at right now and be proud? All those kind of things, those sort of assessments. And like I said, you have to focus on your own mental health and your own journey and what you think is ethical, what you think is right. And then, hopefully other people do see that and it inspires them. I think a lot of us, like I grew up and there's a lot of people that I kind of viewed as heroes or people I looked up to. And more often than not, they ended up disappointing by other aspects of their personality or just being complete fakes in some capacity. So I think that really directed me of like, at least I can be honest to those in my inner circle and those that I love and honest to myself. I think there's a lot of lying to yourself that pushes that. And some of the things that were valued in previous generations, I do think are changing. It's going to take some time, and it's never going to be universal. I don't think you're ever going to change that completely. But there are more people in my generation that I think are prioritizing themselves, mental health, and family over just having billions and billions of dollars. And they might control a lot, but I don't, you hear it over and over again. They're not necessarily more happy, or they're not necessarily at the end of the day better off in a lot of ways. It'd be nice to not have to worry about the bills or buying a house.
Sure,
and so those are all the things we have to consider, and that's fine. But there is a value of just the day-to-day and momentary peace that you have to find within yourself and by the people that you surround yourself with.
Beautifully put. I appreciate that, your perspective and your experiences, and doing this for the love of the game, for the love of your fellow man and woman. And we won't give too much thought to those top 8 and know that it's unconscious greed that I believe is running them. And I think that we're shifting into I don't think that will sustain. And I think we're shifting into a new paradigm with what's going on in the world. And, the pressure cooker that we're all in, I've been thinking about, I have a post that I'm going to put out here soon about, who pressed the turbo button. And I think that things are going to change in a rapid fashion. And you've positioned yourself and your foundation you're in a great spot. And I really deeply value the work that you're doing, and hopefully, this conversation will serve to continue to help in the retelling of the story and promoting this really powerful message that you have. And if people were tying back to the ambassador program that we talked about earlier, if someone wants to get involved, what would be the next steps to grabbing a shovel and pitching in, whether it is a $500 donation, or whether it is someone saying that they have 5 hours of time that they could spend, or someone who has a veteran in their circle of influence now, and they're feeling like there's enough positive signals that they can maybe start a fundraiser or something. What would you say to them?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the easiest way is sort of the passive support of, just follow us on social media. We're on all the major ones, Instagram, Facebook, and there's a lot of great articles, and, just contribute to the conversation and push other people to do the same, because then that expands our message in sort of a passive way. For the more direct, you can go to heroicheartsproject.org. The immediate is there's donations if you have that ability, and, we're a registered nonprofit. Every single cent goes towards the veterans. None of us take any money from it. It's all volunteer. And if you, maybe not financially in a great situation, but you still want to help, there's the spot that I think the tab says support us. There's the more information about the ambassador program, and there's an application to sign up. And so you can either do that or just send us an email directly. And if you have questions, If you know veterans or you are a veteran that's looking to sign up for our program, then there's a veteran application as well. You can also be an ambassador. If you just have questions, just email us. It's pretty easy through the website, and it's all there. All the information is on there describing the various ways you can help. There's many different tiers, so it just kind of depends on what you want, what you think you can bring to the table, and we'll do our best to sort of empower that.
Beautiful. Thank you for breaking that down. I want to be respectful of your time here. I respect greatly your strong expression, you being a former Army Ranger and doing this brave and bold work. What do you recommend to somebody who might be struggling right now with the pressure cooker of all that's going on in our world? Any words of wisdom, words of advice that you can give to our listeners on how to live a healthier, happier, and stronger life, more resilient life in these precariously uncertain times?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you don't even need psychedelics. Psychedelics is just a tool, and it's not for everybody. It can be, a helper, especially if you have a lot of barriers. But even around that, the best way is just really focus on your mental health on a day-to-day basis. And it can be tricky because there's a lot of things vying for your attention and obviously a lot of stress. But if there are those things, figure out what is stressing you. Like, be more intuitive into what's stressing you out, what's causing you anxiety. I guarantee a lot of it's probably social media or news driven.
Yeah.
And so if you are extra sensitive to that, it doesn't have to be a complete shut off, but designate, timeout periods or designate times that you do that in certain, make sure you just control it. Because if you just have it on your phone and you're constantly exposed, then it's giving you that feedback that's not helpful. And so, yeah, I mean, it's stressful and there's a lot, but within that, it's also a great opportunity for people to come to terms with what is bothering them and to work on their intuition. It's not you are intuitive or not, it's a muscle almost, and you have to build on it. You have to constantly reflect inwards and build it so you can go through your emotions without the need of substances.
Beautifully put. Thank you for imparting that wisdom. Thank you for taking your this time to share and reconnect, and so wonderful to hear, the what's new and the your perspectives on what's going on in the world. And it's been a true delight, and really thank you for breaking down the incredible potential that lies in the heart and mind of our war veterans. And I think that each time we have these conversations, the messaging gets more and more clear. And it's truly an honor to be on this path and to have had this time with you.
Yeah, always a pleasure to talk to you, Matt, and glad to be the first one to come back, and I hope for many more revisits. And like we said, we'll get Jenny on next time and talk more about the Ambassador Program. But yeah, as always, thanks for being the platform to spread this message and all the work that you're doing to support us and to guide people through what your own experiences are.
Thank you so much. Great connecting. It was great having Jesse back on the show. If this message resonates, this inspiring work that the Heroic Hearts Project is doing, this veteran collective soul healing mission, if this resonates and you want to get involved, please check out the Heroic Hearts Project. You can find out more about their organization and this inspiring work that they're doing at heroicheartsproject.org. And this ambassador program is an opportunity. It's an olive branch for us all to get involved and to engage this veteran collective soul healing mission head on. Our war veterans, they need us. 22 die by their own hand each day. Many are stuck in self-abuse, and the Heroic Hearts Project is doing great work to combat that veteran suicide and to heal the hearts and minds of our war veterans that, as we talked about in the show, can enforce that community resilience and really lead the way out into this unknown. So thank you so much for listening. Much love, y'all. We just finished another round of the Worthy Fight Mastermind. What is this community-based service initiative all about? Cultivating peace, calm, and resilience, and a spirit of anti-fragility, bringing more flow into our lives. We also spend much time broaching psychedelic medicines and psychedelic integration. Our group container mantra, First, we create our habits, then our habits create us. We level up by looking within, and we lean upon each other in these uncertain times. Community support is essential in these unsettled waters in which we all now swim. In addition to the group coaching, I have a few spots left for my one-on-one empowerment coaching programs. If this resonates, please reach out for a free Fostering Flow discovery call. If this doesn't, that's cool, but I still implore you to seek objective guidance with all that is going on in our world. The buddy system is an absolute must. Find a coach, guide, or mentor. Now is the time to level up. For more information or to apply, visit nltrans.org. Much love, y'all. Peace.